I think that the majority of us focus on trolling, which is great. It's the most effective, let's be honest, right?
Definitely.
I mean, because you're trying to cover water, you're trying to locate these fish are pelagic. They're going to be going around and swimming around all over the place. So you need to cover water. But on the flip side of this, and I've seen it sprinkled here and there on YouTube on, very like Lake Ontario. I've seen recently this year a guy do some open water salmon jigging, like deep water, like 60 plus feet or stuff like that.
Yeah, like where you would normally troll.
Yeah. And it sounds like that's what you're kind of doing?
Yeah, so I've done that a lot. Well, you're always out there on the boat, and fishing's really good. And the first thing that comes across my mind is, man, how can I get them jigging, right?
Yeah.
But like you said, you got to cover water. And that's probably the number one thing I've learned, even while out there jigging, is there's a lot of water out there. A lot of water.
Yeah.
So you're catching them so fast and furious trolling when fishing's really good. And you think, man, I can come out here jigging and do it no problem. It's a lot tougher than you'd imagine, but it's definitely possible. You can go out there to 180 feet, 200 feet, and you can do it.
That's insane to say that out loud. Like, yeah, we're just gonna go up to 200 feet. Now, that being said, I mean, I have seen a ton of videos from the guys in like Superior, right? The northern guys. Because I think Superior has a lot of Lakers, right? Mm-hmm. And they actually specialize. Like I've seen YouTube videos, and I can't remember some of their channels, but they're out there with like 2, 3, 4 ounce weights with big bait, like big tube baits and such, and just dropping it down for Lakers. Is that kind of what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm doing plastics, but a lot of spoons, just like the same stuff we're doing in the harbor.
Okay.
But I definitely up the size because you got to get down there, right? And, in the harbor when you're fishing 20 to 40 feet compared to now I want to fish 50 to 90 feet.
Yeah.
You want to get down there and, so you definitely got to up the bait a little bit.
Let's start with the tackle for this. What are you using for your setups? So your deep water, heavy baits. What are you typically running for this?
I really like an ounce Castmaster or even ounce and a half, 2 ounce of them jiggy twitches I use a lot.
Okay.
Those are really nice. Just like the stuff you'd use in the harbor.
Yeah. Just bigger weight.
Yeah. Just a bigger weight, which is sometimes hard to find, but you can get it out there. But the plastics, I really like the plastics out there too. Seems like they got a little more finesse to it.
What type of plastics are we talking about?
Like a Kalen's jerk minnow or something like that. White plastic.
We really can't go wrong with white.
You cannot go wrong with white. White works anywhere in the world.
And 5-incher or so, or bigger?
4 to 5.
4 to 5 inches.
Yep.
So rod reel.
I like the long reels or long rods.
Okay.
Just like I use the Akuma Customs 8.5, 9-foot rod. I like having that lift and control.
Are you going to medium heavy rods because you need that backbone for the heavy weight and stuff?
Okay. Absolutely, definitely. Okay. I like the finesse tip because it just feels good when you're fighting them. Mm-hmm. Get that extra, double over.
Yeah, you get that play. Yeah.
But I definitely need some backbone on it. For one, for fighting the fish, and for two, like the backbone, the second half of the rod is what's lifting your bait. Really.
Right.
If the tip of your rod's super flexible. Every time you go to lift that bait, it's not doing much to the bait because your rod is bending over.
Yeah.
So that backbone is where you're getting kind of your jigging action out of it.
Well, what kind of line are you running?
I usually do 30-pound Power Pro.
Okay.
With a 12 to 15-pound floral leader.
And then cadence-wise, is it just a slow lift drop? Are you really yoinking it, like ripping it?
I'm really ripping it.
So really, really aggressive out there.
Really aggressive. So like me and Rob were talking earlier before we started. You don't got flashers in the water. You're not pulling them in with any kind of flashy, ooh, look at this. Like, they need to see your bait. So I'm trying to get the fish to see it. I need to make it erratic, get the vibrations in the water. Like, I need to call their attention for sure.
Now, we talked about kind of like the gear you're running. Walk us through, how do you even find them? Like, how are you deciding on, I'm going to stop right here, I'm just going to drop down? Walk us through that process, because I think that's very interesting and certainly what people are going to be sitting there wondering, like, how do you even decide
this? The biggest part, right? Fish where the fish are.
Yeah.
So, well, I kind of got an upper hand. I fished where I left off trolling the day before, right?
Sure.
But definitely want to be where the fish are. So what I used to do before I had live scope, which live scope honestly doesn't help you that much out there. But I would kind of putz real slow with my motor and try to either mark bait or fish. And I noticed if you can get over a cloud of bait that also has hooks in it and drop down in there, you got a good chance of hooking up with a fish because you got active feeding fish down there. So I try to find that. But just you're looking at your local reports, just like someone that's going out trolling would. We're catching them in 100. We're catching them in 120, 150. Go out there, start there. But you got to cover water. Don't just sit there and jig in empty water. Move, putz around with your trolling motor or even your big motor. Move and try to either get hooks on your graph or bait fish. You need some kind of life down there.
Yeah, I think that's important. I always say that even for fall king fishing, you know, my personal philosophy, you know, we start the king season and the first thing I always see is guys come out in their bass boats and then they just park in wherever in the channel or the harbor and they just sit there.
Just hoping.
And they're just hoping for something to come across. And I've always found that to be not as effective. Where
sometimes you don't have a choice because there's so many other boats.
Oh, yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is. However, my philosophy is much like yours, which is I won't really bother jigging for kings and close unless I start seeing some kind of congregation of them around, or if I notice that they're just hovering in a certain area, then I'll work around that area. Otherwise, you're just kind of waiting for like that one fish to just swim by for like 4 hours.
Sitting there just hoping, fishing in empty water, which is, you know, this is how it is sometimes. And, you know, fish move in and they move out.
Yeah.
But I like fishing over fish. I like just, for one, you know, you're better off fishing where the fish are, but it gives me hope. You know, when you got fish on the screen and fish down there, you're like, all right, they're here. It gives you much more hope and a better chance for sure.
Yeah. There was something you said about live scope I'm going to circle back on. Before I do, though, now you've let's say the scenario here is you're going over, you see a bait ball or so, you know, let's say you're in 100 feet of water, you see bait down like 40, you see a couple hooks below that. How are you fishing this? Are you dropping to the bottom and yoinking up? Are you kind of jigging it like you would for tuna, or you lift up, crank? Like how do you target fish, especially if they're sitting in the middle of the water column?
Yeah, no, I definitely try to fish suspended in the water column.
Okay.
I'm not usually fishing the bottom. The fish aren't on the bottom. The bait fish are up. The salmon are up. So fish in the middle of the water column. It's without live scope, it's a little bit of a guess. You know, you're dropping your bait down. A lot of times I'll hit bottom, bring it up a few cranks, and start jigging. And big rips. I mean, you're covering such a big amount of water out there, huge amount of water. So big rips, bringing it up, fish in the middle of the water column, and you need to get it in the, not so much in their face, but they need to be able to see it. You need to be in the realm.
Yeah.
Definitely don't want to be below them. You want to be fishing either at their level or above.
Above, yeah.
Do not want to be below. They don't feed down. They feed up. So you want to be above them for sure. The one thing that the live scope helps me with out on the lake, so you can only see 100, 120 feet around you. In the harbor, that's great. That's everything. You can see everything. Out on the lake, it's nothing. You're fishing so much wider, so much bigger water. So the best thing that the live scope helps me for is to get the depth of my bait. So I can sit there, have that pointed one direction, and I can open my spool and let it go down and stop it. And it's, all right, I'm fishing 40 feet down. All right, I'm fishing 50 feet down. And that's what helps me the most.
You use it in down vision?
No,
I'm
using it forward facing.
Okay.
So the best way I found when I first started doing it, I'd go out and I would try to mark a fish and cast at that fish. It's too hard to do.
They move. By the time you've casted this, got to their level, they've already like out the cone.
They move so fast. You know, even though I can see 100, 120 feet, by the time I see a fish and cast at it, it is gone away onto the next thing before my bait can even get there and sink down to it. So the best thing I found to do was to do a drift. You need to cover water out there, almost like a very slow troll. So if you can get a nice drift where you're moving and just sit on the side of the boat, try to get the depth you want with your spoon, middle of the column. If I'm fishing the hill and 90, 100 feet, I'm fishing 50, 60 feet down, 40, 60 feet down with my bait, and you do a nice slow drift, doing big rips. And you almost want to drift over fish. And the fish, if you drift over them, they will interact with your bait.